From the Caves and Jungles of Hindustan by Madame Blavatsky. Vanished Glories. Benares, Prayaga, now Allahabad, Nasik, Hardwar, Bardrinath, Mathura. These were all sacred places of prehistoric India, which we were to visit one after another, but to visit them not in the usual manner of tourists, with a cheap guidebook in our hands and a cercione to weary our brains and wear out our legs. We were well aware that all these ancient places are thronged with traditions and overgrown with weeds of popular fancy, like ruins of ancient castles covered with ivy, that the original shape of the building is destroyed by the cold embrace of these parasitic plants, and that it is difficult for the archaeologist to form an idea of the architecture of the once perfect edifice, judging only by the heaps of disfigured rubble that cover the country. As for us, to select out of the thick mass of legends good wheat from weeds, no guides and no cercione could be of any use whatsoever to us. The only thing they could do would be to point out to us places where there had once stood a fortress, a castle, a temple, a sacred grove, or a celebrated town, and then to repeat legends which came into existence only lately under the Muslim rule. As to the undisguised truth, the original history of every interesting spot, we should have to search for these by ourselves, assisted only by our own conjectures. Modern India does not present a pale shadow of what it was in the pre-Christian era, nor even of the Hindustan of the days of Akbar, Shah Jahan, and Aurangzeb. The neighborhood of every town that has been shattered by many a war, and of every ruined hamlet, is covered with round reddish pebbles, as if with so many petrified tears of blood. But in order to approach the iron gate of some ancient forest, it is not over natural pebbles that it is necessary to walk, but over the broken fragments of some older granite remains, under which very often rests the ruins of a third town, still more ancient than the last. Modern names have been given to these by the Mussulmans, who generally built their towns upon the remains of those that they had just taken by assault. The names of the latter are sometimes mentioned in the legends, but the names of their predecessors had completely disappeared from popular memory, even before the Muslim invasion. Will a time ever come for these secrets of the centuries to be revealed? Knowing all this beforehand, we resolved not to lose patience, even though we had to devote whole years to exploration of these same set places, in order to obtain better historical information and facts less disfigured than those obtained by our predecessors, who had to be contented with the choice of collection of naive lies poured forth from the mouth of some frightened semi-savage, or some Brahmin unwilling to speak and desirous of disguising the truth. As for ourselves, we were differently situated. We were helped by a whole society of educated Hindus who were deeply interested in the same questions as ourselves. Besides, we had a promise of the revelation of some secrets and the accurate translation of some ancient chronicles that had been preserved as if by a miracle. The history of India has long since faded from the memories of her sons, and is still a mystery to her conquerors. Doubtless it still exists, though perchance only partly in manuscripts that are jealously concealed from every European eye. This has been shown by some pregnant words spoken by Brahmins on their rare occasions of friendly expansiveness. Thus, Colonel Todd, whom I've already quoted several times, is said to have told a story by a Mahant, the chief of an ancient pagoda monastery, And here's the quote. Sahib, you lose your time in vain searches. The Balati India, which is the India of foreigners, is before you, but you will never see the Gupta India, the secret India. We are the guardians of her mysteries and would rather cut out each other's tongues than speak. Yet, nevertheless, Todd succeeded in learning a good deal. It must be borne in mind that no Englishman has ever been so loved so well by the natives as this old and courageous friend of the Maharana of Udaipur, Oodeypur, who in his turn was so friendly towards the natives that the humblest of them never saw a trace of contempt in his demeanor. He wrote before anthology had reached its present stage of development, but this book is still an authority on everything concerning Rajasthan. Though the author's opinion of his work was not very high, though he stated that it is nothing but a conscientious collection of materials for a future historian, still, in this book is to be found many a thing undreamed of by any British civil servant. Let our friends smile incredulously. Let our enemies laugh at our pretensions to penetrate the world mysteries of Aryavarta, as a certain critic recently expressed himself. However pessimistic may be our critics' views, yet even in the event of our conclusions not proving more trustworthy than those of Ferguson, Wilson, Wheeler, and the rest of the archaeologists and Sanskritists who have written about India, still I hope they will not be less susceptible to proof. We are daily reminded that, like unreasonable children, we have undertaken a task before which archaeologists and historians, aided by all the influence and wealth of their government, have shrunk, dismayed, that we have taken upon ourselves a work which is proved to be beyond the capacities of the Royal Asiatic Society. Let it be so. Let everyone try to remember, as we ourselves remember, that not very long ago a poor Hungarian who not only had no means of any kind, but was almost a beggar, traveled on foot to Tibet through unknown and dangerous countries, led only by the love of learning and the eager wish to pour light on the historic origin of his nation. The result was that inexhaustible mines of literary treasures were discovered. Philology, which till then had wandered in the Egyptian darkness of entomological labyrinths and was about to ask the sanction of the scientific world to one of the wildest theories, suddenly stumbled upon the clue of Ariadne. Philology discovered at last that the Sanskrit language is, if not the forefather, at least, to use the language of Max Müller, the elder brother of all classical languages. Thanks to the extraordinary zeal of Alexander Xmomedoukoros, K-O with two dots over it, so umlaut, K-O umlaut R-O umlaut S. Tibet yielded a language, the literature of which was totally unknown. He partly translated and partly analyzed and explained it. His translations have shown the scientific world that 1. The originals of the Zen Avesta, the sacred scriptures of the sun worshippers of Tripitaka, that of the Buddhists, and of Aitareya Brahmanan, Aytareya-Brahmanam, that of the Brahmins were written in one and the same Sanskrit language. 2. That of all these three languages, Zend, Nepalese, and the modern Brahmin Sanskrit are more or less direct dialects of the first. 3. That all Sanskrit is the origin of all the less ancient Indo-European languages, as well as all the modern European tongues and dialects. 4. That the three chief religions of heathendom, Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, and Brahmanism, are mere heresies of the monotheistic teachings of the Vedas, which does not prevent them from being real ancient religions and not modern falsifications. The moral of all this is evident. A poor traveler without either money or protection succeeded in gaining admittance to the Lama series of Tibet and to the sacred literature of the isolated tribe which inhabits it, probably because he treated the Mongolians and the Tibetans as his brothers and not as an inferior race, a feat which has never been accomplished by generations of scientists. One cannot help feeling ashamed of humanity and science when one thinks that he whose labor first gave to science such precious results, he who was the sower of such abundant harvest, remained almost until the day of his death a poor and obscure worker. On his way from Tibet, he walked to Calcutta without a penny in his pocket. At last Soma de Koros became known, and his name began to be pronounced with honor and praise whilst he was dying in one of the poorest parts of Calcutta. Being already very ill, he wanted to get back to Tibet and started on foot again through Sikkim. He succumbed to his illness on the road and was buried in Darjeeling. It is needless to say that we are fully aware that what we have undertaken is simply impossible within the limits of ordinary newspaper articles. All we hope to accomplish is to lay the foundation stone of an edifice whose further progress may be entrusted to future generations. In order to combat successfully the theories worked out by 2 generations of Orientalists, half a century of diligent labor would be required, and in order to replace these theories with new ones, we must get new facts founded not on the chronology and false evidence of scheming Brahmins whose interest is to feed the ignorance of European Sanskritists, as unfortunately was the experience of Lieutenant Wilford and Louis Jacoliot, but on indubious proofs that are to be found in inscriptions as yet undeciphered. The clue to these inscriptions Europeans do not possess, because, as I have already stated, it is guarded in MSS, which are as old as the inscriptions and which are almost out of reach. Even in case our hopes are realized and we obtain this clue, a new difficulty will arise before us. We shall have to begin a systematic refutation, page by page, of many a volume of hypotheses published by the Royal Asiatic Society. A work like this might be accomplished by dozens of tireless, never-resting Sanskritists, a class, even in India, which, even in India, is almost as rare as white elephants. Thanks to private contributions and the zeal of some educated Hindu patriots, 2 free classes of Sanskrit and Pali have already been opened, one in Bombay by the Theosophical Society and another in Benares under the presidency of the learned Rama Misra Shastri. In the present year, 1882, the Theosophical Society has altogether 14 schools in Ceylon and India. Our heads, full of thoughts and plans of this kind, we, that is to say, 1 American, 3 Europeans, and 3 natives, occupied a whole carriage of the great Indian Peninsular Railroad on our way to Nashik, one of the oldest towns in India, and, as I have already mentioned, one of the most sacred in all the eyes of the inhabitants of the Western Presidency. Nasik borrowed its name from the Sanskrit word Nasika, Nasika, which means nose. An epic legend assures us that on this very spot, Lakshman, the eldest brother of the deified King Rama, cut off the nose of the giant Sarpanaka, the sister of Ravana, who stole Sita, the Helen of Troy of the Hindus. The train stopped 6 miles from the town, and so we had to finish our journey in 6 two-wheeled gilded carriages called ekkas, E-K-K-A-S, and drawn by bullocks. It was 1 o'clock a.m., but in spite of the darkness of the hour, this was at night. In spite of the darkness of the hour, the horns of the animals were gilded and adorned with flowers, and brass bangles tinkled on their legs. Our way lay through ravines overgrown with jungle, where, as our drivers hastened to inform us, tigers and other four-footed misanthropes of the forest played hide and seek. However, we had no opportunity of making the acquaintance of tigers, but enjoyed instead a concert of a whole community of jackals. They followed us step by step, piercing our ears with shrieks, wild laughter, and barking. These animals are annoying, but so cowardly that, though numerous enough to devour not only all of us, but our gold-horned bullocks too, none of them dared to come closer than the distance of a few steps. Every time the long whip, our weapon against snakes, alighted on the backs of one of them, the whole horde disappeared with unimaginable noise. Nevertheless, the drivers did not dispense a single one of their superstitious precautions against tigers. They chanted mantrams in unison, spread betel, B-E-T-E-L, over the road as a token of their respect for the Rajas of the forest, and after every couplet made the bullock kneel and bow their heads in honor of the great gods. Needless to say, the ekka, as light as a nutshell, threatened each time to fall with its passenger over the horns of the bullocks. We had to endure this agreeable way of traveling for 5 hours under the dark sky. We reached the Inn of the Pilgrims in the morning at about 6 o'clock. And I'm going to pause here and continue later. Till soon. From the Caves and Jungles of Hindustan by Madame Blavatsky. Chapter 4 continued. It is very remarkable that almost all the cave temples in India are to be found inside conical rocks and mountains. It's as though the ancient builders looked for such natural pyramids purposely. I noticed this peculiarity in Karli, and it is to be met with only in India. Is it a mere coincidence, or is it one of the rules of the religious architecture of the remote past? And which are the imitators, the builders of the Egyptian pyramids, or the unknown architects of the underground caves of India? In pyramids, as well as in caves, everything seems to be calculated with geometrical exactitude. In neither case are the entrances over the bottom, but always at a certain distance from the ground. It is well known that nature does not imitate art, and as a rule, art tries to copy certain forms of nature. And if, even in this similarity of the symbols of Egypt and India, nothing is to be found but a coincidence, we shall have to own that coincidence. That coincidences are sometimes very extraordinary. Egypt has borrowed many things from India. We must not forget that nothing is known about the origin of the pharaohs, and that the few facts science has succeeded in discovering, far from contradicting our theory, suggest India as the cradle of the Egyptian race. In the days of remote antiquity, Kaluka Bhatta wrote, During the reign of Visvamitra, the first king of the Somavasha dynasty, after a few days' battle, Manuvina, the heir of the ancient kings, was abandoned by the Brahmins and emigrated with his army, and having traversed Arya and Bharya, at last reached the shores of Mazra. Arya is Iran or Persia. Bharya is an ancient name of Arabia. Mazra, M-A-S-R, or Mazra, M-A-S-R-A, is the name of Cairo, disfigured by Muslims into Misro, M-I-S-R-O, and Musr, M-U-S-R. Kalukabhata is an ancient writer. Sanskritists still quarrel over his epic, wavering between 2,000 years BC and the reign of the Emperor Akbar, in brackets, the time of John the Terrible and Elizabeth of England, close bracket. On the grounds of this uncertainty, the evidence of Kalukabhata might be objected to. In this case, there are the words of the modern historian who has traveled Egypt all his life, not in Berlin or London like some of the other historians, but in Egypt, deciphering the inscriptions of the oldest sarcophagi and papyri, that is to say, the words of Henry Bruschk Bey. I'm going to spell that name for you. B-R-U-G-S-C-H-B-E-Y. And here's the quote, open quote. I repeat my firm conviction is that the Egyptians came from Asia long before the historical period, having traversed the Suez promontory, that bridge of all nations, and found a new fatherland on the banks of the Nile. Close quote. An inscription on a Hammamat rock, Hammamat, says that Sankara, the last pharaoh of the 11th dynasty, sent a nobleman to Punt, P-U-N-T. I was sent on a ship to Punt to bring back some aromatic gum gathered by the princes of the Red Land. Commenting on this inscription, Brugbe explains that under the name of Punt, the ancient inhabitants of Chemi, C-H-E-M-I, meant a distant land surrounded by a great ocean, full of mountains and valleys, and rich in ebony and other expensive woods, in perfumes, precious stones, and metals, in wild beasts, giraffes, leopards, and big monkeys. The name of a monkey in Egypt was Kaf, K-A-F-F, or Kafi, K-A-F-I. In Hebrew, Kof, K-O-F-F. In Sanskrit, Kapi, K-A-P-I. In the eyes of the ancient Egyptians, this Punt was a sacred land, because Punt, or Panuter, P-A-N-U-T-E-R, was the original land of the gods, who left it under the leadership of Ammon, A-M-O-N. And then in brackets it says, Manu Vina of Kalukabhata, ? Hor and Hator, H-A-T-O-R, and duly arrived in Chemi, C-H-E-M-I. Hanuman has a decided family likeness to the Egyptian Cynocephalus, Cynocephalus, and the emblem of Osiris and Shiva is the same. Our return journey was very agreeable. We had adapted ourselves to Perry's movements and felt ourselves first-rate jockeys. But for a whole week afterwards, we could hardly walk. Oh my. And that concludes chapter 4. Chapter 5 is going to be called A City of the Dead. Well, that should be interesting. So, till soon.